We have covered Lauren Chen quite a bit on this channel, so I'm fairly certain that anything that I say here, we all will understand what perspective she's coming from. This is Lauren Chen, roaming millennial, the pseudo-intellectual, the person who is going to do everything in her power to argue the conservative point of view when possible, and it's not really a grift, not that I can tell. For all I can tell, she legitimately believes these things. At least I have no reason to believe she doesn't, because she doesn't position herself as somebody on the opposing side like a Dave Rubin or a Tim Pool. But there's one thing that she always seems to be willing to do, and that is criticize things for being too woke. Now, what does she mean by too woke? Good question. Well, let's ask her herself.
Hey, Lauren here. Let's talk about the politics of football. Now, apparently, this past weekend was the Super Bowl, and I am never into football, like, ever, but still, I feel like most years, if the Super Bowl even happens every year, I really don't know, but most of the time, I know that it's coming up because people are talking about it on social media leading up to the actual date, but it felt like this year, no one was mentioning it until it was actually happening. So is it just
because the previous year we had COVID? We still have COVID, Lauren. Less people are concerned with that when there are other things that have been plaguing people's minds. The virus existing and still not being completely and totally taken care of yet. The fact that there was an insurrection and an election and all kinds of things happening politically. There were so many more things for people to pay attention to this year than football. It makes sense that it would be harder for people to talk about it on social media because they're talking about other things on social media. But I can guarantee you people cared about it just as much. I know because I made the mistake of going to my local Publix and trying to order a sandwich. And waiting in line for everybody who wanted to get their 3,000 pounds of chicken wings for the big game. That experience was identical to every other time I'd done the exact same thing, or even worked in that deli back when I used to do that. So I can guarantee you, people still cared. They just weren't talking about it as much. But, you know.
Is me, or did it feel like not as many people were into it this year as they usually are? I really want to know, but in any case, like all...
Moreover, this is anecdotal evidence. You do know that if you engaged in mostly political conversation during the last year, almost everything that comes into your feed is going to end up being political because of how algorithms work. So of course you're going to get political spins on football more often as well.
Things in 2021, this year's Super Bowl was infused with politics. For example, does Tom Brady represent white supremacy?
Wait. Are you sure that that was the Super Bowl being infused with politics, or external people injecting their politics into it? Which one is it, Lauren? Well, let's find out based on her examples.
Is Jeep telling us we should break bread with fascists? These are questions we will seek to answer, but first I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor, Health with Lauren. So, new studies show that by the time people reach their middle ages, their bodies produce around less than half the collagen that they used to when they were younger. And collagen is, of course, the main building block in our skin, making up 70 to 80%.
Okay, we don't need your advertisement.
Ageless.
I don't need it. Look, this is always a convenient time to plug my sponsor instead of your sponsor. Look, if this stuff annoys you and you just want to take some time out of your day and enjoy time with a loved one or even yourself, maybe go to ddlgplayground.com, use coupon code Suris, and you can get 10% off of anything there. If you don't like me and my content, you can go ahead and get a dildo from there and stuff it down your throat, because that's about how much I care about your opinion. But if you actually want to have fun with what you get, go ahead and pick up an entire pack of things there and just enjoy yourself. You get 10% off, and it helps the channel a lot. So, you know, if sex toys are your thing, go right ahead. If they're not your thing, well, you can always use some of them as weapons of war, Grand Theft Auto style, if you desperately need to. Who knows?
And subscribing, then... So to get this show on the road, the other day I came across a tweet that I thought perfectly exemplified how political something seemingly as innocuous as football has become. So
has become. Somebody else's external critique of football tells you how the thing inherently has become. That doesn't seem accurate.
This is by someone named Eliza Orleans, and she said, "Watching the Super Bowl and seeing so many people in one place is making my heart race. This feels unsafe. And I guess I'm rooting for the team with the racist name over the team with the Trump-loving quarterback in a sport that still hasn't apologized to Colin Kaepernick."
So why don't we go ahead and take a look at this tweet and analyze it ourselves before Lauren goes ahead and injects her opinion into this. So, first sentence. Watching the Super Bowl and seeing so many people in one place is making my heart race. This feels unsafe. True. As somebody who has gone to anime conventions before, as somebody who has gone to literally any convention, back when I did the Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship series, going to that caused the exact same thing. Whenever you're crammed into an area, like, say, a stadium, with hundreds of thousands of people, and your time there is within a couple inches of multiple people at all times, you guys are eating food openly, drinking drinks openly, getting up and going to a bathroom where hundreds of people have gone to before it's had a chance to be sanitized by a janitor. Whenever you're doing that, the likelihood that you will catch something increases. In fact, actually, those of us in the communities that go to these types of conventions call it con crud or con flu. This is a pretty normal phenomenon. Now, I want you to imagine the inevitability of con flu and also the environment that has been created by COVID-19. When you combine these two together, it does create a very scary idea of going to something like the Super Bowl. Not to mention, there's no way to guarantee that everybody around you is going to be wearing a mask, so whenever they cough and sneeze, their crud is going to be all over your back, your hair, literally just floating in the air, being launched all the way down the stands, depending on how far the people are up. There's no way to avoid it. The mists will be everywhere, as they say. At least if you're a fan of Stephen King, I guess. But let's go ahead and continue this little tweet here, so that we can get our analysis out first before Lauren gives us her expert opinion. He goes, "I guess I'm rooting for the team with the racist name over the team with the Trump-loving quarterback. I can understand in a political environment that had Donald Trump, a guy who at least 12 of 14 of Umberto Eco's points on fascism are all ticked by his behaviors or the things that he has influenced. I can imagine not wanting to support a quarterback who's really that big into that politician. Now, I'm not saying that football players are generally the most politically adept people. I have no way of knowing. It's impossible to get a metric on that. But what I am saying is that if I did happen to have a team where the star quarterback was rooting for somebody like that, I would probably be less likely to care about them. And again, when we have the conversation about the Chiefs, Native Americans have been having issue with names like this for ages. This isn't a new conversation that's suddenly sparking up now. It's a conversation that has catalysts that are bringing it into the forefront, things like the Black Lives Matter movement, and a larger understanding of what colonialization even means. Those are catalysts. Those are things that bring these conversations that were already happening within insular communities and bringing them up to the forefront. None of this is new. And the final thing, in a sport that still hasn't apologized to Colin Kaepernick, I can agree with that one. Regardless of your feelings about Colin Kaepernick, if you have more of a problem with the fact that he kneeled instead of standing for a flag than a problem with the thing he was kneeling in order to protest, then I have to ask, why? I have never heard a significant reason that does not shit on the human rights of an individual for why what he did was wrong. Even my parents had tried to argue that you don't do that on company time, and I'll go ahead and explain this as a leftist. If the boss makes $1 and I make a dime, you've given me my argument to shit on company time. Not that that argument can be made as much for football players since they make so much money, but still, I think the point still stands. Who cares? The bosses lose nothing as a result of this.
All right, so for a statement about football, there's actually really no mention of actual football. If you notice, she's only talking about politics there. She talked about a quarterback and an ex-player, respectively.
She actually talked exactly about football. Is reading comprehension not your thing, Lauren?
Mentions COVID, and I guess they didn't have enough social distancing in place to make.
You guess. You opted not to take a look? Well, shit, we can do that. Like, yeah, I can. This is silly, but it's also understandable why they have that set up the way they do. Okay. So even with all of the even with all the stuff being done to the stadium itself to make the stadium safer, you still have people flocking the streets and cramming themselves together. No matter what you do, you have this issue. People are dumb. People are really friggin' stupid.
Make this lady happy. She also talks about, I think it's the Chiefs that we're playing, who have a racist name. Tom Brady, he dared to support Trump, so I guess that makes him unsupportable.
Well, let me see here. If you support a fascist, then yeah, you become unsupportable in my book. That's not difficult to understand. I understand you simp for fascists, and you desperately want to lick leather boots, and that's like the thing that gets you off. But that doesn't mean that the rest of us have to accept that. I am willing to kink shame this.
And I don't know why football would have to apologize to Colin Kaepernick in the first place, considering, from what I'm told, I don't know. He was never a very good player in the first place.
Wait. So let me get this straight. If somebody has a contract that gets terminated by their employer, you can just ignore any of their workers' rights based solely on the idea that they weren't a good worker? In your eyes? What? How is that a good point? Again, you point out that you don't know. I don't know either. But I don't care. At the end of the day, the thing that got him in trouble was kneeling on grass instead of standing up. Fully blacklisting him as a result of him kneeling on grass to argue against police brutality, something that should be so easy to have an issue with. But again, your kink is licking leather boots, so I can see why that might not be seen as important to you. But, Lauren, what you need to understand here is that it doesn't matter if he's a good or bad player. That conversation doesn't factor in. What factors in is the conversation about why he was removed, why he was taken out. Imagine being part of the NFL and then understanding that you've been kicked out or blacklisted because you took a stand, because in your opinion Black Lives Matter, and then superficially later the NFL is willing to show Black Lives Matter memorabilia on its turf. Can you imagine what that does to your psyche, where you realize that, oh no, they're willing to superficially, like, through the standard way that you get with liberals, where they're, like, willing to show support for something, but when it comes to actually doing the work of supporting a cause, no, fuck that. They won't do that. They're ready to throw you under the bus instead. I like how that doesn't factor into the conversation for Lauren, though. It's just, he wasn't a good player anyway. Fuck him.
But to me, this just represents how everything in our current society needs to be about politics. We can no longer just sit down and enjoy watching football
This is Ben Shapiro's point. This is just Ben Shapiro's point.
Because we like football. No, football now needs to represent COVID safety. And
how is COVID safety a political point? How is people dying to a disease a point about politics, Lauren? It's idiots like you that made that political, not the NFL.
Kowtowing to social justice activist players, and perhaps even expelling any player that likes Trump and votes the wrong way. And
okay, so wait. You're gonna bring up this point of hyperbole here, but the NFL didn't expel Tom Brady for supporting Trump, but they did expel Colin Kaepernick for supporting BLM. Actual reality argues against you, Lauren, and it's hilarious.
And actually, I was kind of surprised at just how politicized Tom Brady's entire presence has become. We also have this piece from USA Today that reads, Tom Brady has gotten an undeserved pass for his past support of Trump. I hate that in current year, supporting the wrong candidate is actually something that you need a pass for. Apparently, you can't just be a public figure and carry on with your life if you've been stained by Trump support in the past.
Well, considering that Trump support means that people who love you and are willing to change their own political opinions based around the things that you do, and then you as an influencer openly endorse a fascist, what kind of a message does that send? It doesn't send a good one, and I'm perfectly willing to argue that point.
And this author really lays into Brady. He says Tom Brady was happy to talk about politics until he wasn't. The Make America Great Again hat in his locker, of course, I'm sure we've all seen that photo, the flippant endorsement of then presidential candidate Donald Trump. Only when those ties became inconvenient did Brady decide he wanted to stick to sports and that he preferred to be a beacon of positivity rather than delve into society's thorny ills. Look, if I had to guess why Tom Brady is no longer being as vocal about politics as he may have been at some point in the past.
So you're not even willing to look that up? Okay.
It's because authors like this one and social media activists have bullied him into silence.
That's not being bullied into silence. That's being criticized for the things you did. That's not bullying. Lauren Chen is the type of person to believe that accountability is bullying.
I'm sure there are so many celebrities and public figures out there who would love to talk about supporting Trump or conservatism in general, but the reason why they don't is because they know that doing so is going to open them up to hit pieces just like this.
And if they were to support liberal values or leftist values, they'd be open to hit pieces from the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro's entire arsenal of nutcrackery and Dennis Prager's fake university. As happened with Colin Kaepernick. It's almost as if this problem exists everywhere, but you just you desperately, so desperately need to be the victim. You need it so bad that if you don't get to play victim here, it's like somebody took away your favorite toy. You get to sit here and talk about people who would love to talk about conservative values and, their rights to say those things are being taken away by the big bad media, and then you have to ignore. When it comes to an actual example of somebody who lost their career for standing up for positive values. Oh, well, they weren't a good football player anyway, who cares? This is an excellent example of the mind of somebody like Lauren Chen, where it doesn't matter if it's a conservative or a Trump supporter or even a white supremacist. It doesn't matter that they supported those things and those things are shitty. All that matters is that their free speech is getting infringed upon. But if it's liberal values, if it's leftist values, if it's anything to the left side of the economic or political spectrum, then they're just bad football players. It's not their freedom of speech being infringed upon. It doesn't matter. They're just bad players of the game of sports ball that America revolves around, because everybody just wants football and grill.
And this author incidentally continues, how mighty white of him. Yeah, how dare he listen to our bullying. What a sign of white supremacy. It reads, Brady's ability to enter an...
It's literally a joke, Lauren. We've been using this joke for a long time to point out white privilege. It's like when you say, that sounds about white. It's a joke, Lauren. It's a joke. I'm sure you've got at least 3 Nazi dog whistles you've argued that are jokes at all times.
Exit the debate at his choosing to shield himself from accountability. Again, accountability for what? Supporting Trump? What does...
Accountability for Colin Kaepernick. For what? Kneeling on fucking grass? Oh, wait, he was a bad player, so I guess it doesn't matter in your case. It's funny. I would like to see you use the same standard for both, but you don't.
Holding someone accountable for Trump support even look like? Should we just tar and feather him? Never let him work in the NFL again?
Oh, you mean like what happened with Colin? You mean like exactly what's happening there? Look. Here's what holding somebody accountable in that sense would be. Simple as this. Having an interview with him where it's asked, why did you support Trump? What reasons did you have to support him? And if the reasons he gives are absolutely shitty, are racist dog whistles, or what have you, then use that as a point of accountability towards his career. If they are inane things that literally every dipshit believed, like he speaks the language of the working class or what have you, then fine. Let him go ahead and just ignore it for the rest of his life. But something like that wasn't afforded to Colin. It wasn't. You see, when you ask somebody like a Richard Spencer why they support Donald Trump, you have a backlog of things where they literally said, "Hail Trump the Führer." And it's very easy to hold them accountable for something like that. But when you have a football player who likely might not even know why he's supporting a candidate, merely asking him what his reasons for that are, as opposed to just letting him run under the bus, it's at least better than letting him just dodge the bus here. Especially when the NFL was willing to blacklist a previous player for the high crime of not wanting his fellow people to be killed by police.
He says it's the height of white privilege as this country grapples with the...
Like, literally, it is, though. Dude literally gets to ignore all of his political flippancy when Colin, who's a black guy, gets fired for it.
The far reaches of systemic racism look no further than Brady, for whom the expectations and allowances granted will always be different. Black celebrities can voice their support for radical politics like Nick Cannon has, right?
Wait, so the actual example in the NFL that exists for you to use here, Colin Kaepernick, that one you're not going to appeal to. You're going to tu quoque. You're going to go into a different fucking category and grab a different person completely when a person you already brought up is the counter argument against you.
Right? Black Israelites, hello. And still keep his...
The Black Hebrew Israelites are also an incredibly toxic organization, but that's a conversation for a different day.
...his job, despite blatantly anti-white and anti-Semitic statements. Meanwhile, Tom Brady just wears a MAGA hat, and he's suddenly a controversial figure.
So, can I go ahead and explain this in a way that maybe you'll understand? Or maybe you won't, because deliberately not understanding these things is a wonderful hallmark of conservative media. Trade out MAGA hat with swastika. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is literally Hitler. I'm not saying that he's just as bad. But if you want to understand the impact, the divisiveness, the hatred, maybe it would make sense to just trade out the symbolism and understand exactly what a symbol like the MAGA hat means to people who have been shot by the police, to people who have largely not done that much wrong and yet are being forced to be separate from their kids at the border. How hard is it for you to understand that that hat is a symbol of hatred? And there are people who will likely wear it and say that, no, it's not a symbol of hatred, I just really like Trump. But it's the symbol that represents him and his movement and everything that came from it. And it symbolizes the dead that are his responsibility. 400,000 of COVID. People during the Unite the Right rally. You know, good people on both sides, right? That whole presidency is represented by that stupid hat. Maybe if you understood the power of symbols, this would maybe change your perspective. Or maybe it wouldn't. How do I know?
I'm not having it. It continues, whiteness is the benefit of the doubt, says David Leonard, author of Playing While White, Privilege and Power on and Off the Field. Ugh, what a gross book. Who wants to read that?
Maybe you should read it, Lauren. Maybe you should. That it might fucking help. I don't know. I haven't read the book. But maybe you shouldn't literally judge the book by its cover.
When Tom Brady says, I was just given the hat, or he's just a friend of mine, or when he skips the White House and says, I had a different engagement, he gets the benefit of the doubt. He gets to be an individual. Again, why does anyone need the benefit of the doubt over whether he supports Trump? Supporting Trump is not a huge deal, and
supporting Trump actually is a huge deal, and here's the reason why. As I said before, it comes down to why people support Trump. Now, of the 74 million people who did vote for him, I highly doubt every one of them is a white supremacist or a fascist or what have you. Hell, there might be people in there that aren't even capitalists of all things. But when someone supports Trump, it is always a good idea, because he is a fascist. Failed one, but still a fascist. It is always a good idea to ask why they did it. Why did you support him? What about him rung true for you? What about him spoke to you? Because that will reveal a lot of their character. Them supporting Trump is a big deal, but it's a first step. Because from there, you can either have the conversation about education. Let's talk about the reasons why Trump was a shitty president, and then see if you still would support him after you have context. Or let's dig a little deeper and see if you were supporting Trump for reasons that you might not be willing to vocalize. Things like his flippant racism, the fact that he engaged in the death of the conservative euphemism that previously had racially charged phrases hidden behind, well, euphemisms, and instead he got to say all the quiet parts out loud. He got to be a nationalist on TV. He got to pull us out of things like the Climate Paris Accord. He got to do a ton of things that were damaging to the country, and you get to have the conversation with somebody. Why did you support that? Why is that a good thing? There are many otherwise good people who supported Trump, and sometimes the conversation is just as easy as figuring out that they were ignorant. I have family members who this was the case of. They were literally ignorant of the stuff he was doing because they were only consuming stuff like Fox News. There's no harm in figuring that stuff out. I don't think we really have to go very much further in Lauren's video here, else we're going to end up with an hour-long episode on Lauren Chen. I think we at least understand the problem here. She's willing to engage in double standards. She's willing to bring up an actual example that refutes her point, but dismiss it under some random arbitrary notion like, oh, he wasn't a good football player. And to her, supporting Trump is not a politically charged thing. When most people who are actually fairly understanding of politics know that it is a politically charged thing. And the reasons why people support Trump are varied, and we need to figure out what those reasons are. Because the good stuff needs to be emulated. Put onto an actual, progressive, functional politician. And the bad stuff, the racism, the issues with trying to keep all the brown people out of the United States, the nationalism, the concern of the United States insofar as it functions as a corporation and not a country with actual living, breathing people in it, the deregulation, all that stuff, that can be discarded. But we won't figure out what those things are to improve our politics further unless we have those conversations. And unlike Lauren, we can at least accept that those conversations need to happen. Maybe. Hopefully. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. And as always, everyone, please hit the like button if you haven't already. Please hit subscribe, and please hit the bell notification icon so that you can know when new episodes come out. If you want to support my channel and what I do, please consider going over to Patreon, and there's links in the description below where you can do that. That way, you'll be able to help me feed me, my family, and that random guy who comes to my house and asks for cookies, and I have no idea how he knows my address. Kind of concerned about that one. Anywho, as always, everyone, insert a video tagline here.